Yeah, it's hella
It's
long.
quite long.
Part of that's due to his structure, but I began to like his structure, and we can start talking about the book, I guess, if you want. But
Yeah,
55%.
yeah, I mean, I appreciate it because like the same thing with the Built to Lose, where I think sometimes historical narratives tend to, be told by the winners, and that's not what history really is, right? I mean, I know this is a history of like a totally bizarre subset of basketball, but having the multiple voices, I think, adds legitimacy to the stories because they're not all, they're different in some cases. And so, and you never really know what the truth is, because there's always somebody telling you the story. So, anyways, yeah, I agree. I liked the multiple narrators and the fact that he kind of like at the end, the very end, he starts like doing a like more of like a journal of each year, like the eighth year, and here's what happened, and like does a rundown on all of the notable events, and then he'll add in like some stats or what
Yeah,
have you.
how did you like those?
I like those too. Um,
I didn't like them. I actively didn't like them. I
oh,
was like,
really?
just too many little snippets that like don't relate to each other, and there's no like it was even worse. It was even not worse, but it was even more like no narrative. There was a narrative in each chapter. It was a topic, there was a team, or it was a player like that. The guy I just read about, Johnny Newman, or it was two players like the enforcer guys, the guys that got in so many fights. There
Yeah.
was a narrative to each chapter, but those notes and stuff was just like little random snippets of details. Like, I just didn't read the
I,
last few that I went through. I
well, I
just didn't
mean,
even read
some of
them.
it, like, I feel like it would be more, it's hard because, like, it's so old at this point, and the book came out in the 80s, right? So he's like,
Yeah,
the book is like referencing the present as if it's, Michael Jordan. Like, so it's kind of like, and I mean, clearly, like, obviously I've heard of Connie Hawkins, but I've never seen him play or anything like that. And I
true.
know who Julius Irving is, and I know who George Gervin is, but it's pretty limited, like the players that I knew. So I think for me, I was like a little less connected to it than
Yeah,
some of the other stuff we've read, I guess. But I did find a lot of stuff in it that I think, is obviously like massively influenced the NBA. Obviously, the play style, like all the promotion stuff that they did, giving away T-shirts, the slam dunk, the All Star games, the 3-point shot. I mean, it's. Um, I'm trying to think, and then like even the stat keeping to a certain extent. Um, they really elevated the way that stats were kept, which I think is pretty cool. Um,
yeah. I randomly was clicking around in my Kindle, and I went to a highlight somehow that I or near a highlight, and I scrolled up and saw the highlight, and it's a pretty good highlight to talk about the ABA at least, and beyond just what they talk about in the book. It's clear in the book as you go along that this is the case. They say we got a lot of Dick Tinkham. We get a lot of credit. This is on page 40, I guess, if the page numbers match up to the printed copy. But we get a lot of credit from some people for being bright and innovative, and I guess we were. But if there's one message I'd like to get across about the ABA, is that we had no plan. Sure, we wanted to merge with the NBA. That was a goal, but what plan? We had none. We went by the seat of our pants and made it up as we went along. If a rule didn't fix with something that we wanted to do, we just changed it or ignored it. If someone had an idea, no matter how lame brain, usually someone tried it.
I mean, I think there's some merit to that in a lot of ways. Like, I think, like all the angst about the All Star game now, like, wouldn't it be kind of cool if somebody just came up with a bunch of random crap and just tried it? Like,
Yeah,
you know,
that'd be
I,
better.
I,
That'd be better.
I mean, it's funny because like they were totally flying by the seat of their pants and
Yeah,
managed to squeeze 9 years out of a league that they literally started just to try and join the NBA, just to
right.
try and get absorbed by the NBA.
Hey, Kevin, feel
But
free to come up. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Meg, but Kevin, feel free to come up and speak if you want to. If
oh
you
yeah,
read
it
most of the
should be
book, so
open.
yeah, it's
It should
open
be
to come up. Yeah,
um but yeah, I mean it's just I mean and some of it is so like I think overall, I mean maybe I'll start going through the chronological notes that I have too because I don't want to like say everything I want to say
sure,
before
go for it. Yeah, you're more
talking about
organized
it in order.
than I
But
am always, so go ahead. Yeah,
I think, I guess like I walked away with the idea that overall it benefited like the players and the unions and all of that kind of stuff because it put them in a better position to negotiate,
sure, sure.
and the stuff that I don't know if you got to the part where they talk about the the NCAA agreement that the NBA had and like how they just kind of ignored it and found a
The
way to
law,
go around it. And a lot of times, and like the NCAA is total bullshit, and it has been for this many years, right?
right?
And the NBA was just feeding into like them being able to make money off these guys, and that was the agreement essentially. And the
Right.
ABA was like, well, these guys need to make money. These guys are from like shit poor neighborhoods. They
Or
got
shit
nothing
basis,
in
they
the
called it.
fridge. Yeah,
But
like
they kind of made it up to try to get over the ones that they tried to get. I forget the first person they tried to get, but he was
yeah,
good, and they worked it out to do that with him.
yeah.
It's just so crazy some of this stuff.
It's
There's some good stuff though that I'll look up while you're doing your run through, and
okay.
I got some good things I thought were touching too. There were some touching moments in the book as well.
Yeah, I mean, some
Like
of it was really poignant, I thought. Poignant? I
yeah,
don't know how to say that exactly, but okay, well, feel free to break in anytime with anything, and I'll just. So, yeah, I'd like or perhaps the league that made famous the three-point shot. Maybe some fans know that the ABA gave birth to the slam dunk contest. Astute basketball fans think of it as the league that gave us Julius Erving, Larry Brown, Doug Moe, and Connie Hawkins, as well as Moses Malone and a couple other high school kids who went straight to the pros. Some even remember that it was the birthplace of the San Antonio Spurs, the Denver Nuggets, the New Jersey Nets, and the Indiana Pacers. So that like sets the stage. And then I have that same quote that you just read, the "We had no plan, none," which
mhm,
is it's just so crazy because I think also like eh, to me, it's like only rich white dudes would think like that. Like, oh, let's just build a new league, like,
yeah.
and get away with it.
Hmm.
And then I have, as veteran agent Ron Grinker said, the NBA was a symphony, the ABA was jazz, and I of course had to highlight that because that's the famous.
Go back.
um,
There's a lot of really great quotes in this book, but not really. So you can continue quoting on. I listened to the audiobook, so I didn't like highlight much individual quotes, but I do have a few notes on the book.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, jump
Well,
in anytime or go for it.
yeah, I gotta head out pretty soon, but so let me just go through these.
Sure.
Um, one thing that was really poignant was how many stories there were of teams not doing well, losing money, and then selling to another group that eventually lost money too.
Yeah.
Um, but one of the things that the ABA did that the NBA never really did was because they were trying to get so many teams and to establish themselves. They tried a lot of different things in regards to location. The regional franchise was a thing that didn't exist. Like how the whole story about how a writer came up with the idea of a regional franchise and how terrible it was because they had like three cities. One of them was their home city, and two of them were basically away games.
Yeah.
Um, so that was Carolina, the Cougars. Obviously, like San Antonio, way smaller than Dallas, but the Chaparrals, it just didn't work. I mean, then immediately did well in San Antonio because small towns are passionate for their teams. And nowadays we have 30 NBA teams. If the ABA didn't come, like the rate of expansion for the NBA never would have been the way it was
Yeah, that's a great
because they were
point.
pretty stubborn on the number of teams that they had. Um, I think my favorite part of the book was the Oakland Oaks and the whole Rick Barry stuff.
Yeah.
Honestly, absolutely crazy. Like the fact that he had to sit out a whole year and he did like broadcast and like played in rec stadiums and stuff, and then came and then they basically won like when he came back. That was crazy. The whole Rick Barry stuff is crazy. Um,
It's so
the
funny
fact
because
that
they
I
went
mean,
through that with like more than one player too, where it was like,
Yeah.
yeah,
everything was like a constant lawsuit and they're like losing money out the wazoo and like it's just like what? Just insane. But yet they had like
yeah,
they did have some of the best players in basketball, too, which is kind of
Hmm.
crazy. And the fact that they could
and
even
and,
attract
and
him in the first place.
yeah, yeah, that was crazy. Like you get the right stuff, and that's what appeals to people. Like at some point, money isn't everything.
Yeah.
The one thing, like listening to all the talk about the play style, about teams going all in on offense and then scoring 116 a night as our Kings average 125. It's absolutely hilarious to hear. But a lot of the talk was kind of dated because this was written in like the 80s and 90s, and like the whole NBA. We basically play ABA basketball now. Like
Yeah.
it's all threes and shooting and pace and space and speed, and without
Exactly.
the ABA, we wouldn't have this offensive league that we have now. Like the ABA might have lost in terms of mind share and money and brand, but they won
Yeah.
because everything the ABA implemented is the NBA. They are the NBA now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean he makes a really good case that the ABA really put on a better show in total, right? Like
Yeah. Uh-huh.
doing all the giveaways and I mean all the, the concerts and the contests and that was all ABA stuff and um
Yeah.
it just yeah,
No reason to be conservative about having a good show.
yeah,
Like the whole
totally.
idea of like Showtime, the whole idea of they're selling they're selling a ticket. They're trying to attract people.
Hmm. Hmm.
Like like a lot of this probably wasn't on purpose because all these ABA teams drew horribly, but that was, I mean, it led to better experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I love the fact that they gave people second chances too, that it was like an
Yeah,
avenue for people who maybe, or even like some of the guys they like went out and found them like working factory jobs or whatever and like gave them this opportunity and some of them even like, made it all the way to the NBA from the ABA. Like but they just, for
yeah.
whatever reason, life had not worked out that way for them. Or if you didn't go to college and go the normal route, it just wasn't.
Or even if you were just shorter, like the whole emphasis and fixation on size led a lot of these shorter guards to get overlooked, and then they absolutely destroyed it in the
Yeah,
ABA
yeah,
because they're skilled players.
yeah.
Like ultimately, skill is what matters.
Small ball. It's the beginning of small ball. Um, so yeah, it's really fascinating. How far did you get in it, Kevin? Did you end up being able to finish it, or
No, I wasn't able to finish it.
it's pretty
I
dense?
still have, yeah, I still have like I think 4 hours left.
Yeah,
Like the last like few chapters when they do the actual merger
How
part.
many hours is the audiobook? I'm curious.
It's pretty long. I've been chewing at it like basically all month.
I should have done that whole thing where you do Audible and then Kindle and you sync them up and you listen and then you sync to the what you're reading and you sync to what you're
yeah.
listening. I should have done that.
I
That'd been
know I
Mm,
smart.
considered that too because this one really this was probably the hardest for me to stay super engaged in. I'm not exactly sure why, but I think like yeah, it's sort of the age of the material and
Yeah, yeah.
um
there's some stories that feel repetitive because a lot of the stories of the teams are pretty similar.
yeah,
Like it's interesting to listen to the history of certain team, but after the third failed team, about after the Miami Floridians and the
Yeah.
Baltimore Claws and the Charlotte Cougar, I mean the Carolina Cougars. It does sound repetitive after a while.
Yeah, exactly. Do you have more, Kevin, or
I have like one or two more.
yeah,
This book reinforced one of the beliefs I have because it came up so often. X's and O's and like aggressive coaching is completely overrated. Um, Most of the best coaches in the ABAs like treated players like adults, like it's pro basketball. They're not
yeah,
kids.
yeah,
They don't need to be treated like kids. So you need to implement a system that the team buys into, cultivate a good atmosphere, get players to like you. And ultimately you do have to coach, but like the reason Mike Brown worked when so much more of our X and O oriented coaches didn't was because now we have buy-in by all of our guys,
yeah.
and that's one thing that I think I took away from this. That you see it over and over again.
I guess like I understand what you're saying, but I also disagree slightly. Like one thing that it made me really think about was especially Larry Brown. Like I have
Yeah.
I've always been sort of prejudiced against Larry Brown because of his relationship with Allen Iverson, and I kind of blamed him for Allen Iverson being so misunderstood. And but then I sort of started like this. I mean, all of the coaching jobs that he had in the ABA, and he coached all different styles of basketball in the ABA.
Hmm.
And then he came to the NBA, coached the Spurs, coached the Pistons, coached the Sixers, and those were all totally different basketball styles. So it kind of made
Yeah.
me have like more appreciation for him as a coach too. And like you're saying,
Yeah, being flexible
yeah,
with your style of play, build them around your players, not be fixated on a play style.
yeah. And then the one coach that stood out to me because he's also one of my favorite commentators of all time is Hubie Brown, and he was
Yeah.
only the coach of that. It really only covered him being the successful coach of I can't even remember which team in their successful year. And but that he talks about like basketball in a very modern way in terms of like analytics and stuff like that. But he even says that's like not how he started teaching it, or not how he,
Yeah.
but it sounds like he was sort of a hard ass in terms of like drills and, um, but at the same
That
time, it
was
was successful.
Kentucky, by the way.
Yes, right.
Kentucky,
Yeah.
yeah, the team, the bridesmaid, the team that couldn't win championships, even though they were considered the best for a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And my last note I had was this book made me appreciate George Mikan a lot more. Like,
Yeah.
nowadays he's kind of the end of he's the punchline for a lot of jokes is like disrespected. It's like if you played George Mike and he'd get destroyed by even role players in the current NBA kind of stuff. Man, the best player for the first 50 years and then influential in making the ABA exist. Without him, we wouldn't have the 3-point shot. Without him, we wouldn't have the ABA colored ball. Without him, the ABA probably wouldn't have lasted as long as it did.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That was really I think the people that I recognized in here, my esteem for them grew. Like I didn't know that George Carl was an ABA player. And
Hmm.
and he just
yeah,
tweeted something out like today or yesterday about how Utah should go back to using their ABA name.
just,
So
yeah.
he still thinks about it and tweets about it, and it's
They should.
Mm-hmm.
interesting. Yeah.
Read, reading through this book, like you just see the ABA. It's like a whole world you never would have known has been unlocked. Like everywhere you look, there's like ABA nods.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Or they should call the LA team the Stars. They did call them the Stars, right? That's the LA ABA team was the
Yeah,
Yeah,
Stars.
it
it
was the
was
Then
the
they moved to
Stars,
Stars.
and then they
Utah.
moved to Utah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Utah
Yeah.
shouldn't be the Jazz. That's not Salt Lake City is not the
Right.
home, not the
So the
mecca of
Jazz
jazz.
were the New
New
Orleans
Orleans, New
team,
Orleans,
but
yeah.
then since they moved
Yeah,
around all the time, um yeah, and like the owners changed, and I don't even know what ended up happening or why they took the Jazz name, or like how Denver was the Rockets until
that was hilarious. Like they're at a point in time there were two Rockets.
so funny. Which is crazy. And the Chaparrals, who names their team like the Oaks? Like, why would you name your team a tree type? Like that's just bizarre.
Yeah.
It's funny.
The Memphis Tams is
Yeah,
the worst name I've heard
yeah.
in,
Yeah.
Just
in a long
bad,
time.
bad,
Their
bad,
owner was a
bad.
joke, but anyway.
So let me see. So okay, I mean dunk contest. Let's see if I can like find a spot to restart my little
Yeah.
um the I
Sorry for derailing.
the dunk was so important to the NBA. Pregame warmups became a show. So that to me, like that's like what Steph does now, right? With his little trick shots.
Yeah.
Um, and then the ABA gave a chance to Doug Moe, Connie Hawkins, and Roger Brown, who were in like okay. So I looked up
The
Connie
point
Hawkins's,
fixing scandal thing.
yeah, but it they were innocent anyways. They just got blacklisted. Um, and there was never like anything proven. There was never any evidence. There was never any like charges brought. They just got totally blacklisted. So the ABA like gave them a way to get back into basketball. Actually, so Connie Hawkins's biography is called Foul, and sorry, getting a text. Um, and it's like it's crazy expensive because it's out of print, but I found a used copy for $1. So I'm hoping they send it to me and I can make it into a PDF if people are interested in it. But he struggled a lot. He finally made it to the NBA, but they said like by that time his knees were kind of gone. But I've heard so the Old Fashioned Three, the show that Jerry Reynolds and Phantom and Whitey Gleason do. The Phantom has said that Connie Hawkins is his favorite player of all time. So I was kind of like
Wow.
perking my ears up for that. Yeah, because I guess he just did really crazy stuff as a guard that like nobody had ever seen before. And um, so, anyways, so then the ABA players and coaches forced a faster pace of the game. They pushed the ball up the court. They created a more exciting brand of basketball, the kind of basketball you see in most of the NBA today. When the Knicks were pressing and shooting 3 pointers, so people acted as if it was a new thing, but that's what. Then they talk about the ball. I kind of wish we had the red, white, and blue ball. Like my eyes suck. I think I'd be able to see it a lot better, you know?
Yeah. That would probably be better. Just fun, more fun.
Yeah. And that when they're talking about being able to like give away hundreds of them to kids, I think that's just cool. Um, And then the Lee Mead says like having some like offhand conversation and said like, "Hey, I'd really like to see this league go. If you need someone to help with the stats, let me know." Like, and they take him up on it, and then he gets like a call. Hey, you're gonna keep all the stats, right? So he came up with the following new stats: rebounds, offensive and defensive. The NBA just kept total rebounds. Individual turnovers, we called them errors. The NBA didn't keep the stat. Steals, the NBA did not keep it. Blocked shots, NBA didn't keep it. Team rebounds, the NCAA used it, but the NBA didn't. And those were pretty cool. And then it starts going into like Connie Hawkins um, and the little man stuff you were talking about. Connie Hawkins, Roger Brown, Doug Moe. So Connie Hawkins was very excited to sign with the Pipers. And meanwhile, his lawyers were suing the NBA to let him into the NBA because, of course, you can't be an ABA player without having an active lawsuit against the NBA. So he was so great he could just control the game without breaking a sweat. Everyone who knew basketball knew about the Hawk, and they knew it galled him not to play in the NBA. Oscar Robertson had told me that the two best players in America, not in the NBA, were Connie Hawkins and Roger Brown. And then it talks a lot about Slick Leonard and and the Indiana team, I think. And Slick says the funny thing was that I was kicking over chairs and throwing things long before Bobby Knight did. And then someone writes a book about Bobby Knight and makes $1 million. Um, and I think it
I
was
could talk.
Slick Leonard.
Could I talk about the coach before Slick Leonard, the
Yeah,
guy that
yeah,
was not qualified, or they thought he was not qualified at least, and maybe he
yeah.
wasn't. But I wanted to read something. I thought about summarizing it, but it'd probably be a lot less poignant if I summarized it rather than read it. It's gonna take a while though. But his name is Larry Staverman. He the first season they went 38-40, and then they started the next season 1-7. And I guess they're 1-7 when the GM said, Storen told me, his name is Mike Storen, told me I made a decision to relieve you as coach of the Indiana Pacers. Close quote. He said it in exactly those terms, almost as if you were reading it from a press release. I was shocked. I had no idea it was coming. Storen said, what do you want to do about tonight's game? Because they're playing that night, apparently. And then the reading goes, I had no assistant. We were playing the LA Stars. I said, I'll be on the bench. We went out and beat the Stars that night, so they were 2-7. The players didn't know that I had been fired. When the game was over, I locked the dressing room and I yelled at them, praised them. I gave a very emotional talk. I told each guy what he needed to do to improve his game, to survive as a pro. Then I walked out of the dressing room and went to a secluded part of the arena where I knew that no one would see me crying. I was 30 years old, and to be told you're not good enough to do the job you always wanted, it has to hurt. I was too young and not really prepared for life in the ABA. I also was naive and didn't look out for myself as well as I should have. The thing that meant the most to me came when we went home after that game in LA. The word of my firing wasn't released until I got to my house. Then I went out for a bike ride with my kid. When I got back, the entire Pacer starting team was waiting for me in my driveway. They came to say that they felt bad about me being fired and that it wasn't my fault, that they had let me down. It was a tremendous gesture because most of the time when a pro coach is fired, the players just shrug and wait for the next guy to take over. But these were quality people, and I'll never forget pedaling into my driveway and seeing those players waiting for me. And that's the end of his contribution to the book. I'm guessing I didn't see him any after that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that was poignant in a couple of different ways. He didn't tell him he was fired. He didn't bemoan himself and whine and bitch about it to his players or to anyone else, or just like quit and like walk away from the game that he was supposed to. That they needed someone to coach that game that night. He coached it, and it sucks. I just like to get a little personal for myself. It's like, he was 30 years old, and I don't know if he apparently he never tried to coach again, or he never tried to coach professionally again, because he says, to be told you're not going to do the job you always wanted, it has to hurt. And, that sucks. But
Yeah.
I kind of identify with him a little bit, not in the sense of like being told that the job I love. I never really had a job I really wanted to do and love, but I really thought, I didn't really plan to be anything special, and I turned out to be nothing special. I'm just an ordinary dude, and it just kind of something about that, about like I didn't expect to be this way. I guess I should have planned to be something special if I wanted to be something special, but I didn't plan to be, and I turned out to be pretty ordinary, and I kind of identified with him there, when he said there, what his name was
Yeah.
interview, and then of course the players coming over, the starting lineup coming to see him, and say they're sorry that they let him down and stuff, and it's a pretty good gesture, pretty
I love that
touching.
he told
So
them all what he thought they needed to do too. I think that's
yeah,
really like I that's like one of those things in life, like where I've had like teachers and stuff who have just said like one thing to me that has like changed the whole course of my life. You know what I mean? Like
hmm
where somebody just like takes the time to be super honest with you, and I wonder, what impact that had for those players, like if they were able to take some of that to heart. But I mean, it sounds like that group stayed together for a long time, had a ton of fun, and played great basketball. Um, Even though it was under a different coach after that.
right, yeah. The coach, I have more stuff from about Slick Leonard if you want to get into him. I have some stuff about him. The stuff I highlighted that I think could apply to the Kings, or any basketball team. But I'm a fan of the Kings,
Yeah.
so that's what I care about. But yeah, go ahead
The
if you
only
want.
one I have is all that X's and O's talk is garbage. Basketball isn't a complicated game. The coach's job is to keep the team together. I've never met a player in my life who didn't think he was better than he really was. The coach has to understand that most guys walk around wearing a sign that says, pat me on the back, tell me I can play, say something that will make me feel good. That's why I spent far more time teaching the guys to trust and respect each other than I did on the technical stuff. And I thought that was really,
That's
I
cool because
mean, that's true, you know?
yeah. Well, go ahead if you want to talk about that because
Oh, no.
I highlighted right before that and right after that is what I highlighted for
Oh,
Slick
yeah, go
Leonard
for
for
it.
Slick Leonard. Yeah, I just keep in mind as I say this, if you're for whatever fan that you are of whatever team you are, if you're listening, like apply this to your team, and I apply it to the Kings because I'm a Kings fan. But all he says above that, all great coaches had teams that were together and were physically and mentally tougher than the teams they were playing. So my practices weren't long, but they were demanding, as rough as I could make them. I ran the guys until they dropped, and I ran them some more. That was how they not only became strong mentally, but also physically. Then, when a clutch situation came up, we were physically conditioned to be strong at the end of the game, and we were mentally strong enough not to panic. We believed in each other and that we'd win. When I took over the Pacers, Roger, Mel, and the rest didn't suddenly become great players. They had the talent. I just helped them to bring it out. I made demands on them that no one else did. And so, like that's the value, I guess, even in a pro league, not a high school and a college league, but in a pro league, of running guys and making them work in practice is because it gets them toughens them up mentally and physically. Of course, physically, but also mentally. If you keep toughening them up mentally by being kind of a hard ass and a prick, but
Yeah, it's
that helped to
very,
toughen
like,
them up. But yeah,
it reminds me of Pete Carroll, too, where he said, like, I always try and make my practices harder than the games, so the games are easy, you know?
yeah, yeah. He
Uh,
said that. Yeah,
this is like a similar kind of philosophy of like, practice it until it's perfect and then it's easy, you know? And yeah, interesting.
yeah. And then the last thing I highlighted for Slick Leonard, pretty much, I think, is that right after what you read, I would tell them on day one of practice that they could do something spectacular if they decided to do it together. I told them that we were a special group and that we had the obligations to play ourselves to ourselves to play like that. The guys knew that and responded, and pretty soon the whole team came together like a hand in a glove. So yeah, I mean, he's just kind of he's more the part you read, he's more of an inspirational coach, more of a training them coach, more of a toughening them up coach than he is on all the technical stuff. I guess I just am curious if anyone, yeah, I'm curious about the technical stuff because I don't know it yet and I want to learn it. I am learning it to a certain degree, but I don't know. I know a lot more people know a lot more than I do, but I like that stuff because it's something you can use as a fan to see what's going on and understand it. But like, of course, if I think it's probably more important, but why not both? Why not both? But it's probably more important to have that mentality, that toughness, that togetherness, that team camaraderie. It's more important than knowing, a blind pig or whatever the hell that is, what that means. But
Yeah.
why not both is what I would say. Why not both? But
Well, I mean, I think also, I mean, it comes up in another place in here. Well, I think one of Larry Brown's teams it comes up too, but like where they're talking about like not basically like what Pete Carroll said was like, don't be greedy, like share the ball, or
mhm.
even when they talked about Connie Hawkins, they were saying like, he could have gone out and just scored 50 points every night. But he wanted to play the game the right way, and that meant that he went out and scored 15 and had 15 assists. You know what I mean? And it's like part of I mean, maybe it's from having this Kings team this year too, but like part of the beauty about good basketball is that the team is better than the individual, right? So if you can trust your teammates, you're going to be a better team, right?
Mhm.
Instead of
Mhm.
just having a star.
Mhm. Although Darren is pretty good at the one-on-one deal. I'm
Yeah,
little sidetrack, but yeah. Well, I mean, I'm just really gonna look forward to if we make the playoffs, if the Kings make the playoffs to like how Rudy Gay sometimes would be like he's the guy at the end of the game when he was on our team he would be the guy like to take that shot and they just always did this one on one crap like it was always just like one on one no screen
yeah,
no movement just like give the ball to Gay and let him go to work one on one and or a pull up jump shot. It always frustrated me, but like I trust Fox to do that. I trust Fox like if they're not gonna double team him, then go to work and get that shot because I trust Fox to do that. But
I think like I'm like feel so mixed about it because like last night's game specifically,
okay,
like he had this incredible fourth quarter, right? Where he had like 29 points for the game, but 21 of them were in the fourth quarter. But it still wasn't enough, you know? So I don't know how they figure out how to like overcome that and get more people involved. And maybe the getting more people involved has to happen earlier in the game too, but like it's amazing to watch because they know what's coming. The other team knows it's going to be De'Aaron Fox, right? And they
hmm
still can't stop him. Like
yeah,
they still don't have any answers. But at the same time, I don't know that it's like a good, consistently winning strategy to
yeah.
just always be counting on him to superstar. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
I
agree.
don't
I
know.
totally agree. Yeah, I agree with you that it may not. Well, I agree that it may not be the best. Yeah, there may be a better way to do it.
Although there are some, I mean, in here too, like later when they talk about like Julius Irving, when Julius Irving became Julius Irving, where he was like, I'll just give me the ball at the end of the game. And they're like, but what if you miss? And he's like, well, I won't miss. And he just didn't, you know? And it's like, I mean, there are some players like that. So maybe you just game plan around that, you know?
Yeah,
Um, and this team, the Indiana team, it sounded like they were together off the court. I mean, they had the whole bar scene thing happening and the cowboy thing. And
yeah,
it sounds like it went to like a new level of camaraderie, you know, which I mean, everyone that's in here seems to like kind of say like that those were the best times of my life, you know. It's like such a great team and we valued, you know, the experiences and then there was some guy in there who I don't have it outlined or anything, but who was kind of saying like nowadays all they care about is money, you know, and back in my day it was about basketball and camaraderie and all that. But I mean, that was probably some kind of get off my lawn type guy. Um,
yeah. I see your thread here. I'm going to talk about Roger Brown if you don't mind for a second.
oh yeah, that'd be
Not talk
great.
about him, but just read something and then talk about him. But Roger Brown, to give some background for people that didn't read the book, is he was with Connie Hawkins. He was also, I think you already said this, Meg, but he was excluded from the NBA, banned from the NBA, or whatever they called it, for some kind of scandal that Connie eventually got contested it and was able to get into the NBA, but Roger never left the ABA. He says the best thing that happened to me was signing with the Pacers and getting to play with Neto, Freddie Lewis, and Mel Daniels. I loved Indianapolis and the Pacers, and that was why I turned down a chance to jump to the NBA after the Connie Hawkins case. I never forgot that the NBA wouldn't let me play, but the ABA did. The NBA had to pay me quite a nice settlement from that case, but I had no desire to play in that league. Not when I could stay with the Pacers and be a part of a great team. I still live in Indianapolis today, where I have several businesses. The Pacers in the town have been great to me. So I like that because like screw them guys, screw the
Yeah,
NBA if they're gonna like do this stupid case and apparently do it incorrectly or whatever at the very least and keep you out of the league for so many years. It's like he'll take their money and play in the ABA. Yeah, I mean
yeah, yeah.
instead of giving them more money by playing for them, he'll take their money and play in the ABA. So
It's
I like
so
that quote.
it's such a bummer that so many of these. I mean, I, I don't like go deep into like digging into archival basketball footage or anything like that, but it's kind of a bummer that there just isn't very much, you know, because it wasn't on TV or wasn't recorded for the most part, you know, because it sounds like, I mean, it sounds like people loved him specifically and thought he was really good, and we'll just never know, you know.
Yeah, not like only people like Jerry would know. I'm sure Jerry could talk about him a little
Yeah,
bit at least.
yeah.
Oh, he passed in '97. That sucks. He was only what's that? 55 years old.
Oh,
Roger
wow.
Brown.
Yeah.
He passed a little bit before his 50th birthday, actually. So 55th birthday. So yeah, that's too bad.
So you have more on that Indiana team.
No, I'm done. I'm done.
Um,
Unfortunately.
so then the next part was what they were talking about. I can't remember. I think this was the Floridians team that Larry and Doug Moe were. or Larry was coaching and Doug Moe was his assistant.
Oh, Carolina
Um,
Cougars, I believe, right?
oh yeah, you're right. Yeah. But this stood out to me. The idea is simple. When you get the ball, you have two counts, 1001 and 1002, to do something. If you haven't shot it or made a strong move to the basket by then, pass the ball and cut to the basket or go someplace. The idea was to keep the ball moving. He hated isolation basketball where a guy got the ball on one side of the court and everyone else stood on the other side and watched him go one on one. So that stood out because obviously because of read and react basketball, and this is so,
Mhm.
so much before that. But it also stood out because he was the ultimate coach of Iverson, who was the ultimate ISO
Oh,
dude.
right. Okay, yeah,
But
right.
yeah. But I mean that I thought these little stories about this team was fun. I think I can't remember if this is let's see. So but by the end of the year it was working. The ball was moving around. The egos were in check. The defense was great. Larry had done a lot of super coaching jobs in his life, but I think this was his best. It was like he turned around that franchise for a little while.
Yeah, I have a quote from there, but it's just humorous. It'd take me a second to get it. Oh wait, I can. I know I can do. I can do the whole quote finder thing. It's my last quote. So Doug Moe is his assistant. Doug Moe was a good player in the ABA. I forget why he was in the ABA, not the NBA, but he wrote. He said he got a big knee injury. His knees were gone. Couldn't play anymore. He was told by the coach, by doctors. He says, Larry Brown knew what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. They were good friends. I had no idea. So when the doctor told me that my knee was shot and to forget about playing basketball, I was open for suggestions. Then Larry showed up and asked me to be his assistant, and I said, "Why not? I don't want to get a real job."
And I think the story was I don't have it like highlighted either, but I think the story was that basically um, Larry and Doug came in together because
Okay. Okay.
like
Yeah.
the one of them, and I can't remember who was doing what, but I think Doug Moe was blacklisted and they would let him play in the ABA, and so he got Larry to come with him, and Larry was too short to play in the NBA, but they would let him play in the ABA, and he was really good. But it was like crazy how many times they just have the players coach the team or the coaches playing on the team, like, or the players just became coaches. Like, it's like, okay. And there's only like one to two coaches anyways.
Mhm.
Um, yeah. So anyways, that I thought that part was really good about the Carolina Panthers. And then he starts talking about this Wendell Laudner, 6'4", 220 pound forward, played for four teams, and then he got killed in a plane crash. But I guess he was just like a total personality. And they say he was like a big overgrown kid. He had two-track mind, basketball and sex. He used hairspray before games and at halftime so he'd look good for the ladies. He liked to shoot the ball from unbelievable distances, and that would drive any coach nuts, but he played so hard you had to love him. Poor Wendell, he really was dumb as a post, but he had a great personality. Um, and then there was like I was publicity director for the Colonels when we did the Wendell Ladner hairy chest poster. We stole the idea from Burt Reynolds, who had posed for Cosmopolitan. Wendell's posters sold out in a day. It was like he was like a total ladies' man. And he got like an infection, I guess, and this one just was funny. It looks like you've been having sex too much. Wendell said, "You think so?" He's at the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, how many times a day do you have sex?" And Wendell said, "I don't know, 3 or 4 times." And the doctor said, "Wendell, that's too much." And Wendell said, "Well, it's never with the same girl."
Never with the same girl. Wow.
Anyway, and so there was a picture down here because I guess he was the inspiration for the Jackie Moon character, or part of the inspiration.
Uh-huh.
And then also there are just a couple pictures of like the horrible outfits that Doug Moe and Larry Brown wore because they mentioned that in here too, like Larry Brown's overalls. like, oh dear.
Yeah.
And then I put in here, I had made this racing bar chart of 3-point shots, and it's cool to look at it because it just like a lot of the leading 3 points were actually ABA guys.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, I mean it starts off with ABA obviously, but it
Oh right.
basically Dampier, Louis Dampier was like the 3-point shot leader for years. I think until like the 2000s, the late 2000s. So not the late 2000s, but the late 2010s. Anyways,
Hmm.
um, so then it goes into a bunch of Julius Erving stuff. Julius just dominated the practice defensively. I mean, he made steal after steal, taking away guys' dribbles, picking off passes. And it seemed like with those long arms and huge hands, he came up with every loose ball. And this was like the team where they tried to like play defense, and they were playing defense like so hard they got completely tired out, and they weren't winning any games because they couldn't finish the games. So we admitted that we made a coaching mistake by trying to press all the time. We were usually in front after 3 quarters, but then fatigue would catch us and we'd blow the lead down the stretch. We were wearing Julius out because he was working so hard on defense. So they switched it up and they stopped playing defense for the whole game, and then they started winning and they won like crazy. And then the Julius, Kevin, I'll take the last shot. Kevin said he got chills when he heard Doc say that. It was almost like the voice of God. So Kevin says, okay, guys, if Doc misses, the hand came back on Kevin's shoulder, and Julius said, Kevin, I won't miss.
He sounds like I only read the first few chapters, first few sections about Dr. J, but he sounds like just he sounds like a demigod in the book. I don't know if what he was like in real life, but he sounds like a
Well,
kind
I
of
think he
demigod.
really was the demigod of the ABA because he played for so long. He was so good.
Hmm.
Um, and and nobody knew about him. So he was like, he was like the basketball nerds Tyrese Halliburton or whatever of the
Right,
time. Like
right.
if you were lucky enough to have seen him play, and then he did go to the NBA too and was fantastic in the NBA as well. But I think all of these guys, after playing whatever 5, 6, 7 years, of the ABA where there was like fights every game and like some of them were like
Yeah.
shot, by the time they got to the NBA. So John Sterling said, in the last year of the ABA, Julius was having a great game, even by his incredible standards. He was making one mind-boggling play after another, and there was hardly any noise because it was a very small crowd. After one dunk over 3 guys, Kevin Lawfery, I don't know how to say his name, called a timeout. When the players came to the bench, Kevin went up to Julius and said, I called that timeout because I wanted to tell you that you've just played the greatest 3-minute stretch of basketball I have ever seen. Well, that was kind of cool. And then it was in training camp where Julius first got the nickname Doctor. Willie Sojourner would say, "There's the doctor digging into his bag again." Whenever Julius came up with a new dunk, then he became Dr. J as the others picked it up. It was a very modern nickname.
Yeah.
Let me see. So I've skipped over a lot. I think one thing that I should have put in here that I didn't is like the discussion about the whole Dolgolf plan or whatever,
Yeah, yeah, that
where
was
they were like
important. Yeah.
signing guys and like deferring half of their contract
They just they knew that
or
they
like
could invest money and
investing
it would
it.
go up.
Yeah, which is kind of brilliant in some ways. Like it's kind of a built-in retirement plan a little bit. I
Yeah,
mean, but
except
it
it
sounds like,
didn't keep up with inflation, I would imagine.
yeah,
Towards the end of
well,
the
and
towards the end of it, they'd be like, okay, this is a nice little chunk of change, but it's not gonna.
yeah,
I need more than this to survive this year. So
yeah, and it sounds like a lot of players like sued them, and although
right.
even like the ones that sued them and got all their money up front kind of spent it on stupid shit, in my opinion. Like I think in some ways they might have been better off like leaving it invested and like not, just blowing it on I don't know, cars
Yeah, it
mostly.
depends on the person, really. Depends on the
Yeah,
person,
yeah,
and everyone. If they signed the contract, it's in. They I hope as long as they knew what they were signing, as long as they knew what they were, some didn't. It feels like some. Well, they should have known maybe what they didn't know what they were doing when they signed those contracts. They thought they were getting that
yeah.
million or that 2 million, but they were getting deferred payments over many years.
The other one I didn't put in here is when they tried to recruit Lou Alcindor, and
Yeah,
they hired like all the psychologists and everything to tell them like the best way. And then the guys had like $1 million check and like blew it and didn't offer it, like,
yeah.
and didn't do the plan at all and completely lost the great, one of the greatest basketball players ever known to man.
Hmm.
I mean, who knows if he would have signed with the ABA or not, but just the fact that they did all that groundwork and like spent a bunch of money and like had this strategy and the guys were like, nah, we'll just do our own thing.
I remember there was one line in there where the guy's like, so George Mikan was going in there, and some other guy forget his name, and it's like, I should have been, it would have been nice if this other guy could go in there. So we have one person, at least one person with a brain would be in there, but we didn't do that. It's just those two guys.
Oh Lord. Um so I skipped over a lot. I mean, it's a great book. Uh I it was I don't know if I would have finished it without a deadline.
Yeah.
Um but I also think it's very worth reading all of it. The Moses Malone stuff I found to be really, it's hard to tell if like they're saying that he's dumb,
Hmm.
but they're definitely saying he wasn't college material, that it was like ridiculous to think that college would somehow be a great idea for him. And the story that I didn't put in here is they tell a story about a scout going to see his game, and he was playing for like one team in the first half, and that team started kicking the other team's ass by like 100 points. So they took Moses out and they put him on the other team for the second half, and the other team made up that 100 points and lost the game by 2 points.
Wow.
So Moses was a crazy good basketball player.
Yeah. Yeah. He was a rookie of the
It,
year and MVP in the NBA. Well, I guess he'd already had a few years in the ABA, so that makes
yeah,
sense.
yeah. So, but it was really sweet. I mean, this is like, so in his first high school varsity game, Malone scored 32 points. He was a ninth grader at the time. His high school team won 50 consecutive games and two state championships. Um, he was just good. And then it talks a lot about his mom and how his mom, had been working her ass off and they were dirt poor. And Mary Malone had pictures of Martin Luther King Jr., John and Jackie Kennedy, Jesus Christ, and her son. I just thought that was really sweet. Like, just somebody working herself to the bone,
Yeah.
and he has a chance to help her out. And she was sick too. So to me, the key point was that no one had ever said Moses has to go to college. They agreed that they needed money and they agreed that Moses wanted to play basketball. And when I heard that, I knew we had a great shot at getting it done. Um, Gerald Govan, who had been in the ABA since day one and was sort of Moses's patron and protector, Govan started telling me what kind of rebounder the kid was. So the early line on Moses that no one knew what else he could do, but he could rebound. And then, so Del Harris has this. I just thought this was really funny. Like, I coached Moses with Tom Nissalk in Utah, and Moses just lived off his offensive rebounding. He was so young, 6'11", 270 pounds to 17 pounds in his second pro season. He could run faster than anyone on the team, even our guards. We had a player who said that he could run up, jump, and touch his head on the rim. The guy did it, but Moses wasn't impressed. He just grunted, walked under the basket, and standing still, jumped up and touched his head on the rim, which is pretty amazing when you think about it.
Yeah.
In his second year, Moses broke his foot in an exhibition game. The trainer looked at it and said he couldn't find anything wrong. Foot broken, Moses said, and he refused to play. And he was right; his foot was broken.
Okay.
So, and he, again, turned out to be a fantastic NBA player as well as ABA. And then they talk about like a trainer who had all these weird ideas about like put an empty oxygen tank next to the bench and guys would like go and huff off of it and say they felt better even though there was nothing in it. And but I thought this was, they will tell you exactly where you'll find the middle of the free throw line directly in front of the basket. That indent came from where they pounded a nail into the floor to tie a string from under the rim to where the free throw line was supposed to be. Frank felt that people missed free throws because they didn't line up dead center in front of the basket. He had 1,000 weird things like that. I mean, some of this is just, more stuff about Julius, more stuff about artists. Um, Artist Gilmore. And then it talks, oh, go for it.
I mean, it was basically
Yeah,
just a compound interest plan. What stood
yes.
Yeah.
out to me was I mean, so obviously that's all fake money. They didn't have the money, so they just like inflate the numbers with the compound interest. Um, what stood out to me the most was the agents in that part, like how they're talking about how many agents basically sold out players to the ABA because I mean the ABA and the NBA were paying off the agents. Like I wonder how many agents nowadays are like that, where like they don't really have the interests of the players in mind. And
Oh, I think it happens all the time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it happens all the time. But it's something you don't think about until it's like explicitly told to you.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about, like, in the end, it kind of ended up helping everybody because even though the Dolgoff plan itself wasn't paying the players the amount of money that they were saying it was, it still was like inflating the numbers on paper. So the NBA made their contracts bigger, and then the ABA made their contracts bigger. So it was like, warring raises basically for the players, which I mean, I think was a good thing overall. I mean, you could argue
Yeah,
that players get paid too much or whatever, but um, I think it helped to like get pay or play up, you know, at the time, uh, better than it was before that in the NBA, anyways. And I think, yeah, and the NCAA stuff and the agent stuff is mixed in with that as well, where the agents sometimes would get kickbacks from the colleges as well as from the ABA or the NBA. I think the NCAA stuff is really interesting just because it lasted that way for so long without it changing. And I mean, that this book really makes the case that it was just basically a scam to make money off the athletes. I've lost my place a little bit. Let me see. Oh, it talks about when the ABA and the NBA went against each other, and the NBA was like, "Oh, we didn't really want to win those games anyway." Um, and what does it say that someone looked up? They played the Boston Celtics. Let's see. Well, to us, those games were exhibitions, while the ABA was playing them like playoff games. And so we played the Celtics a couple of times and beat them. Coach Tommy Heinsohn would say that we were playing to win, and they weren't. But I'd check the box score and see that Tommy played his regulars 35 to 40 minutes. So what does that tell you? So then it just sort of starts talking about, the decline and good ABA teams such as Denver, Indiana, Kentucky had all those people plus marketing directors, sales directors. They gave away posters, basketballs, all the giveaways that are common today. The NBA just wrote that off as the ABA using gimmicks to attract fans, and they weren't about to stoop to such a level. At Basketball Weekly, we probably wrote more about the ABA than it deserved because the people were so accessible. The Kentucky Colonels would call and say they had a free plane ticket if we wanted to come down and do a story. The magazine was in its infancy and we didn't have a travel budget, so sometimes we took them up on their offer. The NBA wouldn't think of doing something like that. But I was like, that caught my attention because I think we're again in a time when like, basketball journalism is like, fan driven, not paid very well. It's a great idea for the team to like sponsor the travel of reporters, in my opinion. Um, then it talks about the Spurs, the early Spurs. It talks about the baseline bums. To this day, most people don't know that Julius Erving and George Gervin were on the same team. Um, Sounds like a foundation for a championship team, doesn't it? But they were both young. Um, and then talks about George Gervin when he first got to the league and why don't they use the 3-point shot more? And I said, Coach Bianchi doesn't think it's a good percentage shot unless we're behind at the end of a game. George said, suppose you could make 15 of 20. And then he went and then he made 18 of 20. Um, and then it just talks about like the Spurs being super accessible and having like a Go Spurs Go club for the kids. And like a fan is like in another game, we snuck down by the Spurs bench and sat right behind the team when George Gervin went for 51 points against Memphis. The ABA was always fun. So it just talks about like the showmanship of the ABA. And then it talks about the Larry Brown incident where he makes a comment about the only thing good in San Antonio is the guacamole salad. And then the baseline bums, like every time he comes to San Antonio, they like pour guacamole on him. And when he got hired as the Spurs coach, they gave him like a guacamole salad as a present. I thought that was sort of amusing. And then Hubie Brown. And then I love Hubie Brown. He's one of my all-time favorite people to listen to talk about basketball. And he's probably the first person that I heard talk about it analytically. Um, and so I highlight a lot of his stuff. But so the key to winning is to win with 10 guys. If you're going to play 10, then you have to use pressure defense. Pressure defense hides a player's weaknesses. If you're playing a straight man to man defense, the opposition can pick out a player to exploit. In a press where people are scrambling and double teaming, it's hard to find the weak player. So I told the guys that we were going to use 10 players, and that meant 10 guys would be contributing to the championship. So then he talks about point differential. Sorry, I muted Nick's mic because it was loud behind him. Let me see if I can find it.
Hi, Megaloo.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Good. I do want to say that, we need to talk about the Kings defense. You're playing tomorrow in Minnesota, and you got to play better. Play better defense.
I agree. Do you think they should use 10 men,
I think
10
they
man rotations?
I think they I think they should. I mean,
Who should play that
I,
hasn't played? Who should go in that hasn't been going in recently? Maybe Terrence Davis or someone else.
I think maybe Terrence Davis.
Okay.
Yeah. I think they run out of energy. I think
Yeah.
that's why they don't play defense the whole
Yeah.
game. I think that's really true.
Yeah.
It, and sometimes they turn it up and they can win by only playing it in the fourth quarter, but they can't always do that, right? Like it doesn't. Sometimes it's
Uh,
just like not enough to do that.
yeah. And when you look at this team, like right now, I'm watching the Milwaukee Bucks and Pelicans right now. It's 122 to 105 right now.
Oh wow, yeah.
And Milwaukee is winning right now, and they're about to beat the Pelicans.
Yeah, the Pelicans have kind of fallen apart a little bit. I'm shocked by that, honestly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if Milwaukee wins, if if they beat the Pelicans, if Milwaukee wins, then what happened? Do they move up?
Milwaukee, I think Milwaukee's already on the top of the standings.
Yeah,
And the Pelicans are below us. They're below us.
yeah,
They're actually below us and the Clippers now, I
yeah,
think.
yeah,
So they have a few games to catch
yeah,
up to us.
yeah.
So yeah.
I mean,
Let me
yeah. So I just hope that we can try to do something tomorrow.
I agree. I'm with you.
Why not win? Why not light the beam tomorrow?
Why not? Let's do it.
Light the
Thanks for
beam.
stopping in, Nick.
All right, sleep dreams.
And sleep dreams, man.
Sleep beams.
Sleep beam. Why not sleep beam? Why not light the beam? Can you give me a hell yes?
Hell yes.
Can you go do what Morgan says? Morgan says, fire the laser.
Fire the laser. I can't do it as good as she can.
Morgan's gonna have to say it.
Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully we'll win and she'll have to say it
Is
tomorrow.
Katie going on a road trip tomorrow, or are they doing it from San Francisco tomorrow?
No, she should be there. She was there last game.
No, she was in San Francisco doing broadcast.
Oh, really? I thought they were there.
No, they weren't not there. They were doing broadcast in San Francisco at NBC Sports Studios
Oh, I don't know then.
in San
Yeah.
Francisco.
Yeah. All right, Nick, I'm going to continue on because we're making a podcast. I don't want it to be 8 hours long.
Okay.
Thanks for stopping in, man.
Sleep beams.
And sit back at ya. Um, so okay, Hubie Brown. So then to me, a crucial statistic is point differential. If you average 100 points and give up 100 points, then you'll win half your games. If your point differential is 3, you score 103 and you give up 100, you have a very good chance of winning 50 games. You want to win 55 games? Then score 105 and give up 100. So by the end of the season, our point differential was 7, 109 to 102. That's astronomical. That's the stuff of champions. And in the last 25 games, when we won 22, we averaged 108 points and allowed 92, which is off the charts. So that's just a very modern take, right? I mean, I think people still use point differential as an indicator of, you know, the how good your team is.
I don't understand the math though. I didn't read that part of the book, and I don't understand how the math works. But I'll trust that he's right. To
Well,
be ground. So
he's just saying if you average 103 points a game and
hmm
you prevent 100 points a game, it's just offensive rating minus defensive rating to get net rating, right? But
hmm
he's just saying it in a more old-fashioned way, basically.
Okay, sure.
It's just not, I think it's just not in the same analytical language. That's how I read it, anyways. Let's see. And then it just talks about how he was really into. So as the season went on, he talked more X's and O's, more and more about things like number of possessions, fast break conversions, defensive stops, and point differential. None of us had ever run into a coach like Hubie before. He knew all these numbers off the top of his head. Most of us thought he was just a basketball genius. And then it talks about how he could really cuss, and he was like cussing so bad at one of the games, his wife had to call the broadcast and tell him to turn their mic off because she could hear him cussing through the mic.
That's crazy. From what I don't know him obviously, but from his personality on TV as an older gentleman, it doesn't seem like he'd be cussing ever. But yeah, I guess
Apparently, he was quite prolific.
yeah.
And then it talks about, I wish I would have like found the place. So it talks about this guy Marvin, who was a fantastic player, but who was just extremely disruptive and like wouldn't show up on time. And he was just a total character, though. So it's like I once had Marvin on a post game show, and I asked him about the 13 phones. There was like a rumor that he had 13 phones in his house, and he said, "No, man, I ain't got no 13 phones. Let's see. I got one in the living room, one in the kitchen, one in the bathroom, two in the bedroom. He named about 7 different places that he had phones. And by then we were laughing so hard we had to stop. So he just like this very, a lot of people in St. Louis resented Marvin. He had this superfly image, the wide brimmed hats, the long floor length mink coats, the platform shoes, the big cars, and of course the 13 telephones. He became the trademark of the team, and the town did not relate very well to that sort of Negro, to use Marvin's phrase. Um, and look at what Marvin did for us as a rookie, averaged 24 points and 15.6 rebounds. He shot 50%, and he did it with the worst shot selection I had ever seen a pro player have. He would get the ball, turn around, and shoot it. He didn't care where he was on the court. On the court, he would do everything but pass. I never saw any passing skills from him. I don't know if he could pass or if he just wasn't interested in passing, but he didn't pass. Off the court, I've never seen a player who was so totally disruptive. Anything a player could do that was disruptive and negative to his teammates, or in terms of his responsibility to the team, Marvin would do it. I told our trainer that if Marvin had one of those rare days where every light was green and everything happened just right, and in spite of himself, he got to the gym on time for practice, he'd wait outside for a few minutes just to make sure he was late. So he was just a character. And then Bob Costas has like a whole section about Bob Costas as well. Um, and he ran into Marvin when they were there playing the Kansas City Kings. And Marvin came in, saw me, and said, bro, how are you? I said I was fine, and I asked him for an interview. And Marvin like couldn't get it together enough to come down from his room and like wanted Bob Costas to come with him to meet some people, and then it just was like really weird. Like it seemed like they were insinuating that Marvin was on drugs basically and was super out of it, but then he'd come out and like shoot the lights out. It kind of, not to be like, some of the description reminded me a little bit of like the bad rap that DeMarcus got. And just that he's like a disruptive player, and but he was also really, really good. And then it just sort of talks about like a lot of the second chance guys. You know, there was like a time when a lot of the guys got into drugs. David Thompson, who did go to the NBA, but pretty much blew his whole NBA career. And they interviewed him, and he said, I had a chance to be the greatest basketball player ever, and I blew it because of drugs. It's that simple. It started at the end of my rookie season. After the exhibition games, the regular season, and the playoffs, we played almost 100 games. One day I was very tired, and I started telling my teammate about it. He said, hey, I've got something that will help you. And he just like basically destroyed his career on cocaine. And then it just talks about the ending days of like they had built this league up and they'd lost like $50 million. They were in like active lawsuits. Like they had something like 50 active lawsuits going with the NBA. And yet they had like some of the most exciting basketball players in the world. I thought this one was good. I worked at the New York Post, and the Post had a strong basketball tradition. We were the first paper ever to go on the road with the NBA team. Despite all that, the people at the paper just weren't open to the ABA. I would write stories about Julius, George Gervin, Moses Malone, and those guys, and I was held up to suspicion in the newsroom. How could any of those guys be any good? They're in the ABA. The attitude was that the Nets could never beat anyone because they weren't in the same league as the Knicks. Um, and so, and talks about Julius Erving again, who was just like at his peak at that point, but nobody ever saw him. Um, so anyone who was ever commissioner had to deal with an incredible amount of legal fees. We were suing the NBA for being a monopoly, breaking antitrust laws, anything else we could think of. When I took over in 1973, we had so many lawsuits going that our legal fees were over $1 million annually. We're suing the NBA. The NBA was suing us. We were suing players. Players were suing us. It would never end. Nothing ever came of 90% of those lawsuits other than the lawyers got rich. And then it just talks about like the final deal was that basically everything in the ABA was on the ropes. There was no money left. There were like four viable teams. Well, there were six teams left, but four of them, the NBA really only wanted four of them, and they wanted to pick the parts out of the other ones. Like they wanted to basically like hold a draft for the rest of the players that were left. And like there was an owner who really wanted Artis Gilmore. So they basically only accepted San Antonio, Denver, Indianapolis, and one other team, which I'm not remembering right now. Um, and they had a draft for the rest of the players. And not all of them got drafted, but a lot of them did go into the NBA that way. Um, And so it's ironic how time changes everything. In 1976, guys were complaining about paying 3.2 million to get into the league. Now those same franchises are worth 50 million, 75 million, maybe more. And this is in the 80s, so they're all worth billions now. Well, some people thought the ABA was fleeced by the merger. It turned out to be one of the great business bargains of all time. So then the years after the ABA, so the NBA never acknowledged that it was a merger. They said it was an expansion, and they made the ABA owners buy into the NBA for 3.2 million instead of like an expansion team was supposed to give 4.5 billion, but they I mean 4.5 million, but they let the ABA owners in for 3.2 million. Um, So then in the of the so then the next year of the league's top 10 scorers, four were former ABA. Billy Knight, David Thompson, Dan Issel, and George Gervin. Um, Don Buse led the league in steals and assists. Um, see, former Spirit Moses Malone was third in rebounding. Former Colonel Artis Gilmore was fourth. Gilmore and former Colonel Caldwell Jones were among the top five in block shots. Basically, the players were dominated the NBA. And then I just added like a ton of, just um, like websites, and there's like the logos, and there's this little like fanzine down here that somebody made of the San Antonio All-Star game. And that's about it. That was the book.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you did a great job covering it from what I read, and I'm sure you got the rest of it done pretty well as well.
Well, I think the ending, I was a little rushed reading the ending too. I did end it. There's a lot of really great stuff in the end about Julius Erving, who they called like Mr. ABA. He was really, really the ending, like where they went and were trying to like get the NBA to allow them in. It was really because they wanted Julius Erving in the NBA. Like they realized that they needed to have eyes on him, you know. Um, but there was a lot of other fantastic um, players that went into the NBA too. I'm sorry that I left out. There's also a story about two guards who like get in just randomly, like they just love basketball and they show up as walk-ons to one of the teams, and they kept thinking they were going to get cut,
So they
and they
left
kept
early.
making every cut. And they ended up like having like really long basketball careers
And they
in
would leave. Sorry to interrupt, but they would leave like as soon as practice. They get there hell early for practice to like show they're working hard and to
yeah.
try to because they want to trying to work hard. They were trying to get on, but and then they leave right as practice as soon as practice they jet out of there because people get cut at the end of practice. So they just try to avoid getting cut by just leaving practice as
Yeah.
soon as possible, which is kind of funny. But
And the one of them, I want to say it was Willie Wise or something. I want to say it was Mike Cleve and Willie Wise, but I think those are names are probably wrong. But yeah, they turned into to be two of the best players in the ABA for a couple years before translating over to. That was just like kind of warmed my heart, that kind of idea of the underdog making it,
Yeah,
um,
for sure.
or you can't see that really happening in the NBA. Anything else? Any other thoughts or?
Not really for me. No, not much. I guess I'll look at my highlights real quick, but I don't know if I have much else.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great read. Pretty entertaining. I was kind of hoping to go back to more of like an analytical bent with our next one, like do
Uh-huh. Hmm.
Thinking Basketball or something, which is like 150 pages.
Oh, nice.
Um, I can't find it to buy it on Kindle though, or I can't find it like a.
Oh,
It's just the physical version right now.
really? That guy? He's on podcast. He has a big podcast, a big website. He does
Yeah.
YouTube videos. Why is he not on Kindle?
Well, it's on Kindle, but it won't let me buy it on Kindle. So I'm not sure. I actually sent him a
Oh,
message, so I'll find out.
nice. Nice. I think I
Yeah.
actually bought that already on Kindle when I could buy it. I think I already bought that book. Let me make
Oh,
sure though.
really?
Let me open up let me go to that part of my Kindle and try to find it, search for it. But I think I got it. I got it a while ago and haven't read it, but I got it a while ago. Yeah, yeah, I got it. Yeah, it's
Well, let's
181 pages, but it's yeah, I'm at 1%.
let's read that one next.
Okay.
And I'll buy it physical if I have to.
Yeah, and
Um,
yeah, I guess. Oh, Kevin's back. Okay, good. Kevin, if you want to read that book, feel free, of course. We encourage you to do so. Thinking Basketball. I don't know if you heard it. If you don't know when you left, but Thinking Basketball is the name of the book. And Joseph and Ty and S. Jeffrey and Royal Rebounds. If you guys want to do that too, it'd be awesome. We'd love it. I'm sure, right, Meg?
yeah, I think it's I don't know. Daly said it's a little uh like it's he referred to it, I think, as like um
Intellectual.
a manifesto
A
type of
manifesto.
thing.
That sounds
A
interesting. That sounds
basketball
interesting.
manifesto. Yeah.
That
So
sounds
I think
fun.
it's a little erudite, but I've also
Yeah.
heard it referred to as like the fan's guide to watching basketball analytically.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Because he is
so
kind of that's
yeah.
I think it is called Thinking Basketball. His music that he has on there, if you've heard it, is kind of trippy and an intellectual type way. It's kind of like an intellectual guy that's like he could be writing philosophy books somewhere, but he's instead at a university. Instead, he's watching basketball games, writing about, talking about them, writing about them, making videos about them. But he's kind of a
Is this a Ben Taylor book,
yeah,
the by
Yes,
yeah,
Thinking
Ben
yes,
Taylor,
yes.
Basketball?
Ben
Yeah.
Taylor, yeah, Ben Taylor. He's kind of a guy
Yeah.
that could have a PhD in philosophy somewhere, but instead he's writing about basketball. That's what he's got like, in my opinion. That's my view of him. But whatever.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say about this book. I like I said, I did track down, supposedly I tracked down a copy of Foul, the biography of Connie Hawkins, which it's available, like you can buy it, but it's like $89 or something. And I found a copy for $1. So it might be completely trashed, but I'm interested in that too. If I can maybe make that into a PDF for other people to read or something at some point, but it's not here yet. And I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to get. So it might be just like a mass of weird pages that are unreadable or something. But it definitely perked my interest about Connie Hawkins. This book did, because I'd heard before that he had a lot of, he just had a very unfair kind of experience in the NBA. So that's another one that's on my list.
What is that book you reference about the Milwaukee Bucks? The GM guy who like was a part of building team. What's the
Oh,
name of that book?
that's
Maybe
the
could you
mid-range theory by Seth
mid
Partnow.
range theory.
Yeah, and
Well,
he actually does. He does a he does like an almost daily podcast on Colin as well, where he has some really fascinating guests on.
hmm.
I've enjoyed it since he's been doing it. He's just been doing it like for the last, I don't know, 3 months or something. But
He
he does he has great. guests on from all different, like he had Caitlin Cooper on and they talked about the Pacers. He had someone on and they talked Kings. He'll have like stat nerds and stuff on and they'll get really nerdy. He had an emergency one yesterday about the Jaren Jackson block controversy, Reddit block controversy. Anyways, that's a good podcast. I recommend it. And it's on Callin, so you can like ask questions and stuff too.
Kevin, where did your question come from? Why did you ask that question? Did you talk to Meg some other place about that, or is that from listening to this podcast, or?
No, I think it was came up in Cowbell Talk a few
Okay,
times,
got it.
so I thought that'd be that'd be an interesting book to do for a book club. I don't know if you already did it already.
Yeah, we did actually.
Ah,
Yeah, it is great though. I do recommend it. It's almost like it's a trippy book because it's a little disjointed. Like you can almost like pick it up and then read it like the different chapters. Like you don't even have to
Yeah,
read them
that's a
in
good point.
order.
Good way to look at it.
But
Yeah.
they're really interesting to like understand like the day to day of a basketball team and like how often they get a practice and how they have to function under the salary cap. And it has some really interesting utilitarian information in there, in my opinion. Um, yeah, I found that book really fascinating. It's interesting because I feel like I go back to all the books that we've read and try and make them apply to the ones that we're reading, you know? And they do relate in some ways. Some do, some don't, I guess. But yeah, that one's really good. Sprawl Ball, that one, and then Spaced Out are all sort of about the 3-point revolution.
Spaced Out, I think he describes in the acknowledgments that he just pitched it as an X's and O's book, and that's what I think it is. It's an X's and O's book.
Yeah,
He breaks down how to run the pick and roll in various ways, and how to defend the pick and roll for sure in various ways, and all sorts of different things that you see in like X's and O's on videos from coaches. He breaks down a lot of that stuff, but in writing, which is fantastic because I don't like watching videos to learn, various X's and O's stuff. I like to read about it. And the basketball dictionary, the basketball action dictionary on the internet, as well as that book, are really good for that kind of stuff. Spaced Out, that is. Videos are great too. It's just harder for me to learn for some reason videos, but yeah.
all right. Well, Kevin, did you have any last thoughts on this book
yeah.
or?
I did want to say a few things. At the end of the book, there's a few things I wanted to talk about. The Kentucky Colonel's owner, the stuff he did at the end of the ABA, giving up on that franchise, and then buying the Buffalo Braves, and then trading it to get the Boston Celtics is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And the Spirits of St. Louis, I didn't read to that part yet. Like I was still on that chapter where I stopped. But the deal they made, getting the consistent TV revenue, it was one of the best business deals anyone has ever made. And I don't was it mentioned much?
I don't remember. I definitely remember the John Y stuff, but I don't
Yeah,
remember the spirit stuff as much. And maybe it's just because I
yeah.
wasn't perked up to that. The other thing that they talk a lot about that I didn't really go over either was that um, I think it was, I can't remember which two teams now, but there were two teams that were going to go into the NBA and basically like fuck you to the rest of the ABA teams. They were just going to go into the NBA and like be gone from the ABA. And that like cast a major pall over the last year of the ABA where everyone was kind of upset about that and like mad. Even though that was had been the goal, these two teams weren't doing it as like, together with everyone else.
Hmm.
And so that was kind of the beginning of the end of the whole thing.
When
'Cause,
oh, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead.
No. Finish your thought.
I don't even know what it was.
Oh,
Just
I was gonna say, because of reading about this, like listening to it, I was reading a little bit about the AFL and their merger, and it's pretty crazy that basically the NFL and AFL were so worried about what's the Raiders owner the Raiders
Al
Davis that
Davis. Yeah.
Al Davis that they did the merger behind the back and all went in and did the merger. I thought that was insane. Like, but obviously ABA was a very different situation. I thought this book was excellent. I really appreciated how the style of writing in this book is all like folklore, folk tale kind of stuff. Like it's stuff of legends, stuff. I mean, no one really knows about this stuff, and this is basically the primary source of most of the resources online. Even that the ABA site references this book all the time, but like even the sources here are not 100%. So like it's
Yeah.
crazy how such an important part of basketball history was lost to time because there just wasn't any eyeballs on it. Like the draw was horrible, but I'm really glad this book exists because without it, we wouldn't know half the stuff of the ABA. It would have just been lost to time.
Well, I think it's so interesting that he says like that everyone like the access that he got and the interviews that he got, and the fact that like Julius Irving talked to him and I mean all of like the sort of big names that he mentions he
Mm-hmm.
actually sat down with them and talked to them, and then some of like the deeper cut guys too. But just the fact that everybody still remembers it as like, I think what I was going to say before too is like, even at the very end when it seemed like when, half the teams are like folding or like literally like, we're having to borrow like athletic tape from the next team they were going to, or like there was a point where like one of the teams had to have the team they were playing pay for their
The
hotels
jersey,
because they were
the
so out of money, like, and it just
yeah.
like everybody knew it was the end, but they still felt like they were like fighting the good fight, and they
Mm-hmm.
were the underdogs. And um yeah, yeah, it's definitely, it is interesting. I like that you pointed out that the guys who are more of like the cutthroat business people really did end up profiting, sadly, even though they were sort of like the treacherous villains of the
Mm-hmm.
story, but they
Yeah.
ended up coming out on top, which is kind of messed up.
I really
Yeah.
liked the learning in this book about just some of the weird stuff, like the San Diego Conquistadors with the was the coach for 1 year that like
Yeah.
just for
Milt.
the draw or yeah, Will, and it's stuff like that. It's like only in the ABA would anyone even consider it, and all the teams that did eventually make it into the NBA were all really really well run organizations even from the start. Well, I
Yeah.
mean, San Antonio, when they moved, they became really good. The Pacers were really good. The Nets, once they got their new ownership, moved to the Nassau Coliseum and got obviously they had Julius Irving, and then the Denver Rockets, the Denver Nuggets had money bankrolled, so they were all just really well run, and they got the coaching from Carolina, and always just really well run. And one part that stuck out to me was the Pacers chapter where they're talking about they wanted to be the Boston Celtics of the ABA. Like,
Yeah.
and it's crazy how they've never actually won a championship in the NBA since,
I
but
know.
they've
I know
always
that
been
is.
incredibly well run. So it makes me admire the ABA teams that made it through because they're all just excellent organizations.
I love the idea that there are still like, I mean, I consider myself old, but I mean, this is probably a generation before me of people who would have remembered going to these games and like seeing the games. But I loved, that was a lot of what I loved about that Spurs chapter, is where they actually interviewed like a fan who was a kid at the time,
Mm-hmm.
who like,
In
snuck
with the
his
back
friend in
door.
the back door. Yeah. Like, I mean, because it really does feel like you're doing something dangerous and new, and the games were, the guys were like getting in fights on the court, and just it was like the pumped up version of basketball, and
Yeah.
yeah, great stuff. It's so interesting how much it really does relate to like the play style that is on the
Yeah.
court now. That's the part that's really the through line for me. And that's like why how I found out about this book actually is from reading the other books about the 3-point revolution and when they started using it, you know. But like I
Mhm.
said, like even until the 2010s, the leading 3-point uh, uh, shooter was from the ABA. So like
Yeah.
even until the 2010s, they still were not using that 3-point shot like the ABA used to. So
Mhm.
it took, you know, 30, 40 years for it to even, you know, get to a level where it was in the ABA. It's pretty interesting stuff. All right. Well, we've been on here for quite a while. And I think, are we cool with our next book being Thinking Basketball?
I'm down.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be
Awesome.
great.
Okay.
Should we
Cool. Thank
I
you.
mean, I'll ask you later. Cut this part out.
Oh, oh, go for it.
Well, okay. Do you want to tag Taylor in Twitter a few times maybe over the course of a month, but not really like just so
Yeah.
maybe he can retweet it
Yeah.
maybe
Let
and
me,
maybe his followers can come check it out maybe
yeah.
because other people have
Yeah. Let
retweeted it,
me,
the authors. So
yeah. Yeah. I'll do that. I couldn't find, I didn't look for Terry Pluto. I kind of forgot that part. But Ben Taylor's definitely online. So yeah, for sure. That would be fun to do that. Okay, cool. I'm going to shut her down and help my kids get ready for school tomorrow. But thanks everybody for showing up and doing this.
yeah, thanks, Big. Appreciate it. Okay.